Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today that NetNatives is putting on called Brand Biden. Today, what we're looking at is America back on the map for international students. So as we go forward here, you'll see a lot of different statistics that we've compiled over the past couple months about the change in presidency in the US from Donald Trump, who has been the president for the past 4 years, over to Joe Biden, who is having his inauguration currently at the moment. It's going to go to the next slide here. So when looking at our survey demographics, we can see them by gender, age, and location. So first, when we look at the gender side, we could see that a little bit of a higher percentage of male potential students or students currently that are interacting with our survey. In terms of the age, you can see that predominantly we're looking at students 18 through 24. So mostly undergraduate students, early graduate students, but we also do have some older students that are coming into the survey. And then for location, this is mostly based for international students. So you will see Europe, Africa, Australia and Asia, North America, and the countries outside of the United States, as well as South America. What is our research methodology? So in terms of the survey, it was a 23 question online survey was given to eligible panelists that ran from the 16th to the 29th of November, included a mix of quantitative and qualitative data so that we could have a good understanding of not only the trends, but also what is the reason behind some of these trends that we're seeing. And then for two, the sample, it was given to 811 current and prospective students from around the world. Again, this is from Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, and Australia. We have excluded the United States from taking part in this survey. And then when we look at the level of study in terms of, what type of students are these? We can see that majority, 60% of them are undergraduate students. The second majority would be postgraduate students, so 14%. You could also see that we have some that are currently in high school or high school equivalents in the continents that they are from. You can also see some other graduate PhD students as well. Another focus that we're looking at is the studying abroad, and particularly in studying in the US. We can see here that 55% were very interested in studying abroad. And then in terms of looking at some of the interested in studying in the US, we can see that it's a bit mixed of where they would like to study ultimately. 49% are somewhat interested, 32% very interested, and then about 20 not at all interested. So we can see here that we've got a good level of discrepancy between the surveys that we put together. So key finding number one, the overall feeling that we're seeing in terms of Joe Biden becoming president is positive on international students in studying abroad here in the US and international education. So we're seeing 70% of students told us they felt somewhat positive when they heard the news that Biden had been elected. 5 in 10 students also felt at least somewhat positive when they heard Kamala Harris would also be vice president. When looking at the second key finding, international students are more likely to study in the US once Trump's term ends. Donald Trump has been the president here since 2016. So again, for the last 4 years. We're seeing that increase of a trend now starting on this inauguration day with Joe Biden, that 60% of international students that are more likely to study in the US once Trump's term ends and Biden does become president, which is going on right now. And he should be giving his inauguration speech at the top of the hour as well. And the key finding number three, the demographics truly do matter. Females are 18% more likely than males to increase their likelihood to study in the US once Trump's term ends. Hispanic and Latino people are 23% more likely than white people to increase their likelihood to study in the US once Trump's term ends. These are both interesting statistics to note. When we look at females, for example, we know that was a big topic of conversation with Donald Trump. Some of the news that came out when he was originally running for president, just about females and his stance in general. So I think at no surprise it is that they are more likely with Joe Biden to want to enroll here within the United States. And Hispanic and Latino people also are interesting. If you take a look at this past election, we know that specifically in Florida and other states, Florida, it was 47% of Latinos had voted for Trump. Nationwide, you could see Joe Biden had 66% of the Latino vote. But this tells us that the younger generation, we're mostly surveying 18 to 24 students. So while their older generations may have voted on the conservative side with Donald Trump. They are more likely to want to come to the US, would lean more so with Joe Biden. Another key finding that we found here, students will feel 2 times safer and more welcome studying in the US under Biden. So students are over twice as likely to feel safe and welcome in the US once Biden becomes president. Obviously, there's been a lot of events that have happened just in the course of the past, 2 weeks here with the Capitol building. You look at the summer with COVID-19, the BLM movement, everything that has been going on here. Students are now feeling a safer direction of how the country is going, and traveling from an international country, their family, their friends are all left behind. A campus is supposed to be a great sanctuary for them to come and learn and build friendships. So it's good to see that the students are now feeling more likely that that will happen under the next presidency. And with the executive summary, the 2020 US presidential election was one of the most highly anticipated elections in the country's history. Obviously, we do have the global pandemic going on right now. But again, it was a big focus of, was it another 4 years of Donald Trump, or was it going to be a change of direction? And not only did it affect the US, but you could really see the culmination around the world of so many people that were intrigued and engaged in this election. And we'll actually show those statistics for you as well. What interests us in particular is the impact the election result may have on the US as a study destination. So when Biden's win was announced, what did international students have to say on that matter? Surveying students from a range of countries, again, we're going across different continents here. We can see that the overall reaction to the new Democratic Party leadership has been a positive one. As we mentioned, 70% of students we spoke to were feeling somewhat at least positive about Joe Biden being elected, 50% with Kamala Harris. Interestingly, 6 out of 10 expressed the viewpoint they'd be more likely to study in the US thanks to this news. So again, these are all key reasons and great trends that we're seeing now for education moving forward as we go into the next 4 years with Joe Biden. So again, how aware of the election were students internationally? Are you aware of the recent news that Joe Biden won the US presidential election and will become president in January 2021? We could see here that 98% of students, these are students coming from all across the world. So we can just see here the power that social media has, the power that digital media has on each of the students as they see news go across their timeline and their feeds every day. So you can see that power. Again, it's going to change and culminate, and we need to, as a school and as a higher education entity, take advantage of this as a time where more international students are willing to come to the United States. And we can see here over 90% actually follow the US election news coverage here. So again, that's a mass majority staying involved in this. And this election was a process that took weeks to finalize. There are claims of fraud and invalid vote counting and duplicate votes because of the mail-in ballots from COVID-19. So there was a lot of factors, and 90% of international students were tuning into that. So that's really, encouraging to see, obviously, that they're now thinking of this as a positive outcome. How did students feel when they had heard the news? We looked into how did you react when you heard the news that Joe Biden was elected as president? 76% of students told us that they felt at least somewhat positive. We can see here in terms of these continents, those who felt the most positive lived in North America, obviously bordering the United States and the several countries there, as well as Australia and Asia. They were about 80% positive. Students in Europe were the least likely to say they felt positive, about 70%. However, when you look at this demographic or this graph here, you can see the majority is still feeling positive. Small percentage is in that somewhat negative, very negative, or neutral, which is a great trend to see here. When we look into how did students feel when they heard the news, really in 3 words, describe how you felt. These are the most common answers that we've taken from each of them. 44% were happy, 39% relieved, and then 19% hopeful and optimistic. Again, this is great to see, especially here within the US. We want international students to feel comfortable, to be happy, relieved, hopeful, optimistic that they can have a future in the US, whether that is enrolling at institutions here, or as we'll look into in a bit, working here after they go to school and the possibilities that can be here for jobs. So a lot of great news coming from the election. When we asked students why they responded positively, really, kind of what their intuition was, they felt Donald Trump was racist and that he had caused or worsened many social issues. Those who responded negatively said they felt Biden was no better than Trump, and some students questioned the integrity of the election itself. Key points that you can see here: Trump was a racist bigot and would literally take anyone as a leader over him. Change was needed after the 4 years of Donald Trump. Totally disagree with Trump's politics of racism, xenophobia, and think Joe Biden will be a serious president and will solve many problems Trump has not solved over the course of his 4 years. And then for the negative side of Joe Biden, again, looking at the integrity or fraud in these elections, that has proven to be incorrect. Hoping that Donald Trump would be reelected for a second term, and don't believe that Joe Biden is any better than Trump. Obviously, as we look into Joe Biden as president, here at Net Natives, we'll also be evaluating how it's been on the education landscape as well. So while we're talking about this kind of at the forefront of the presidency, we will still be reevaluating it as the weeks, months, years go about with Joe Biden. How did students feel when they heard the news? How did you feel? This is more so inclined with Kamala Harris was elected as vice president. When they heard the news that Kamala Harris was going to be the US vice president, over half the students felt at least somewhat positive at 54%, while 40% felt either positive nor negative. Those who felt the most positive were in the country or in the continent of Africa, and students in Europe were the least likely to say they felt positive, 43%. This is an interesting poll, I think, to kind of take in. Notably with Kamala Harris, she is the first female to ever hold the vice president seat. So again, some people can see this and maybe within that change, they may be less inclined to like the position. As we can see here, we saw with Joe Biden, it was about 70%. And I think with Kamala Harris, there's a couple of other points that we will touch on here over the next slide. When we ask students why they respond positively, again, great to see a woman in a position of power in the US. That has never happened before. I think especially for the events that happened 4 years ago with Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, people were skeptical as if a female could be in this position for some reason that they had. And then those who responded negatively told us they felt her win could be seen as identity politics and some disregard with her past decisions. Her past decisions, notably, Kamala Harris was the attorney general and district attorney of California until 2017. So again, they're referencing some of the things that she had voted or ruled upon that could lean a little bit differently with the left and how they view things. But positively, again, the fact that a Black woman is elected vice president is a historic moment. To have a female person of color be elected demonstrates the start of positive change, especially in light of the recent BLM movements. It's wonderful and shows progress to have a woman in such a high power. And as the female VP, it makes me confident to take up any position in any industry and assures me that I can do anything I put my mind to, which is fantastic to hear from an international student that would be coming over here, that they feel in the United States, they have the ability to accomplish and achieve everything. And then on the negative side, you can see the background, again, as a prosecutor, some felt that that wouldn't be the best fit in terms of the VP seat. While I believe progress in having a woman vice president, I believe she has also done and will do many wrong things despite all she says. And then finally, again, they're bringing up identity politics as well. Again, we're looking at thoughts on studying in the US. So how much does the US appeal to you as a study destination under? So again, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. We can see here that on average, the score for Donald Trump was at -2 compared to Biden's average score of +1. We can see here on the left side with Donald Trump that very unappealing. All the way on the left side is at 24%, really the kind of utmost and the majority that you could have, with kind of right in the middle being at 18%. So the majority of the population that we've surveyed, again, it was not appealing over the past 4 years to come here and study with all of the issues that had been going on within the country. We're looking at Joe Biden in the future with the Democratic Party. We can see that poll pretty much shift exactly to the right, where very appealing is taking over. We can see here that 20% are in the 1 to 2 confidence range with Joe Biden. And hopefully we expect that trend to go up as international students start coming here. Once the COVID-19 pandemic does come to an end with the vaccinations that are going on, do we see this trend rise over the next couple, again, weeks, months, and years? Again, here, this one, how safe would you feel studying in the US under Donald Trump versus Joe Biden? And this is one I think, in terms of looking at the statistics, it's a bit frustrating to hear how it was in the past. When you think of 25% of international students, a quarter of them feeling unsafe to come, to the country here to study, that is something that is extremely concerning. Again, here, averaging -2 for Donald Trump. When we look at Joe Biden, a score of +1 here. When we look at international students and some of the things that convince them or guide them to coming in the US. Safety is number one. Like I mentioned, their parents are at home. They're not seeing their students on a day-to-day basis. They want to make sure they're safe. They have friends around them, their classrooms, they're going to learn, study, have every opportunity. So again, here, the direction that we had in the past 4 years was a bit challenging, but looking at the future, the positive trends seems to be going well with international students. Now we look at how much does the US appeal to you as a study destination. So again, here, very similar trends you're seeing most of the time with Donald Trump, very unappealing. That average score of -2, again, is seen across within these questions. So you can see that, in terms of safety, in terms of study destination, the US is now more appealing to the student that may have never been to the country in the first place, but they now want to study here, or they feel like the US education system will take them where they need to go in the next steps of their career. Then we look at when Biden becomes president and Trump's term ends, which is happening today. Would you be more or less likely to study in the US? Again, here we can see 60% of students tell us they are more likely to study in the US once Trump's term comes to an end. North American students and African students showed the most increased likelihood with 75% and 63% respectively. As we can see here, more likely is obviously taking over the bulk of the percentages. No impact is still pretty high here as well. So most of the people are saying there's nothing of a change that they're going to see. And then typically below 10% for each of the continents are saying that it is now less likely that they will come to study here. When Biden becomes president and Trump's term end, would you be more or less likely to study in the US? So again, when we look at these questions, I talked through Hispanic and Latino earlier, how it was interesting in terms of checking on the generational side of things, how registered voters, especially in the states of Florida and other southern states, had voted pretty highly of Donald Trump. But it seems like their younger generation, their children, are more so siding with Joe Biden and studying in the US moving forward. So we can see they were the highest at 73%, followed by Black people at 70%. In contrast, white people, 8% of people said they would be less likely to study in the US when Trump's term ends, which obviously that does speak to in terms of the differences and some of the things that people brought up with Donald Trump during his presidency of the past 4 years, and his lack of a knowledge of other races, international people, international students, and how they fit in this country. So it is good to see that now these other races of students coming from other continents, countries, are feeling more likely to study here in the US. Now we look at when Biden becomes president, would you be more likely just to travel here to the US? So this is not even looking at the education side of things. It's just, would you ever want to come here and be a tourist, or essentially, see some of the different cities that we have here? And of the students who said they were more likely to study in the US when Trump's term ends, the top reasons for this were they feel they would experience less racism, feel safer in the US, and that Biden's policies would be more progressive. It's an almost stunning but then not surprising thing to read, that you can see here specific reasons as to why an international student would not be comfortable with coming to the US. You can just look at things like the insurrection and the coup that happened 2 weeks ago at the Capitol. That feeling of safety is extremely important for these students. So again, with Joe Biden, we can see that more likely is over 50% on every single continent outside of the US here. So overall, 66% of these people that we polled are more likely to just travel here into the US. Then when we look at, again, the switch of the presidency, would you be more or less likely to study in the US? Again, we looked in terms of women versus men here. Women are 18% more likely than men to want to study in the US once Trump's term ends and Biden takes office. Again, I think this comes at no surprise. considering all the backlash and feedback Donald Trump would get over the course of his presidency when he was running for the first term as well. So we can see the discrepancies, but ultimately that international women and students are looking to come back over here and study in the US. Of those students who said they were more likely to study in the US when Trump's term ends, the top reasons for this were they felt they would experience, again, less racism, feel safer in the US, and that Biden's policies would be more progressive. We have some quotes here as well, and then again, some other things that you can see, but 28% of comments, again, we polled a little bit over 800 total students, 129 of them touched on less racism, and 107 said that they would feel safer. These are, almost a quarter of the students that are mentioning these things. So obviously these changes that are coming about, I think were very deserved, and they're going to take education, particularly international education, into a higher pillar, which we can hopefully exceed upon over the course of the next 4 years. But just some quotes here I'd like to read. Again, as a Black female of African descent, former President Trump has made his stance very clear on foreign nationals, Black people, and has condoned violent behavior against Black people and other foreign individuals. Surely anyone and anything outside of the Republican Party does not follow the same path, which is why we can only hope that Biden keeps to his vision. Biden does not incite hate or encourage an angry individualistic zeitgeist. He seems to care about the American people, where Trump only cares about himself. Again, here you can see the common things of racist, xenophobic, queerphobic, like Donald Trump is. So I'd hope those toxic ideologies would be lessened under Biden's term. And again, safer and more protected. That's ultimately the big themes that you're seeing here, and what we're moving towards, a more safe and a more protected United States, especially when it comes to education. Again, here we can look at, why are you less likely to study in the US when Biden becomes president? Smaller percentage here, but we do think it is important to see, what the people that are thinking negatively, our thoughts are about it. We can see here that they dislike his policies, left-leaning ideals for the Democratic Party, and concern for civil unrest at 2%. Again, you can see some comments here. He is deceptive and does not combat crime and disorder, especially on college campuses where I would be studying. He also believes and encourages the woke liberal culture, which could easily victimize me or other low-ranked immigrants. Mentioned before, I would have voted for President Trump. I believe that my views on certain aspects are more in line with this than with Biden's, because I think the US can be a more polarized country and it become a more violent place. And then populism and socialism. So again, here we can see that common Democratic Party views or common kind of, stereotypical Democratic Party views are listed here. You can see socialism, populism. So again, some things from the opposite side or the opponent side of Joe Biden. Traveling to and working in the US. So this takes a look at, again, if someone would like to work here in the US, so a potential student that would like to, have their career listed here. And we can see here over half the students telling us they'd be more likely to work in the US once Trump term ends. Again, this varies by continent, but you can see here overall 54% are more likely to work in the US with Joe Biden moving forward. And what do students want to change? This looks into university, college, making more likely to consider studying in the US by creating integration activities for international students with local students at the same time, more affordable tuition for students from countries where the exchange rate is not relative and impossible to afford, probably by providing a scholarship and ensuring my personal safety. Today, the world is technological. If universities promote tech-oriented careers, they will be able to survive regardless of the president. Opportunities and information of existing opportunities in the US would encourage students to study abroad. As we can see here, what international students, they want the opportunity to succeed. They want the ability to feel safe, comfortable, and integrated. They want to get along with the local students. They want to come here, be friends with them. They don't just want to stick with people that they know from home. They come here for all of those opportunities, which is awesome to see and read about. And then do you have any hopes for the future of the US? Again, hoping that during the time of Biden and Harris, they make a positive impact, that they refund the World Health Organization and dismantle many of Trump's policies. There's a slow but sure growth in the US when considering discrimination, but I do see this slowly going away. I hope it becomes somewhere more appealing to live for foreigners like myself. Again, we can see here, Americans will have more access to ideas like free healthcare, basic right and the culture of crimes against young Black people, particularly Black men, will be condemned instead of celebrated as seen under Trump's administration. One day a more exclusive country, and education and healthcare will be free across the US. So ideas that are coming from other countries that are enlisted there here to the US, which may be a challenge, but interesting to look at. And is there anything else you want to tell us about the recent US presidential election? Again, you could see here it's hard to predict the outcome, but Biden did win, and it did win in the key states. Feel that people primarily voted Biden just so Trump does not win the presidency again. They saw more of a pro-Trump versus anti-Trump. Honestly, people are looking at it as a clown show and referencing some of the debates that we saw across. As a non-American, they followed the elections closely and slept poorly for a week until the election was closed. Ultimately, happy about the results of the election, but I am still concerned about what's to come in the near future. Again, here, he's lucky that Trump screwed up the BLM and pandemic situation so early, because otherwise progressive wouldn't have showed up to vote. He's the embodiment of corporate interests, and he has the charisma of a cod. So again, different sides being taken for each of the different candidates in the past election. But in conclusion here, on the whole, international students are feeling pleased that Joe Biden is set to become the president and Kamala Harris as the vice president, feeling happy, relieved, optimistic to hear that Biden had won. And seeing a Black woman in the position of VP was inspirational for many students. And again, here we list some of those key statistics. 60% of students are more likely to study in the US once Trump's term. We can see that across North America and Africa with 75% and 63%. Hispanic and Latino, 70% say they were more likely of studying in the US, followed by Black people whose likelihood increased by 70%. And then women were 18% more likely than men to enroll in US education. And the students who felt they were more likely when Trump's term ends told us that they felt they would experience less racism, feel safer in the US, and felt that Biden's policies would be more progressive. That is the conclusion of the presentation. I know we did have one question that has come in just from the panel that has joined, and for the audience, and really appreciate all that have tuned in so far as well. In reading this question, it comes in: as marketers of higher education, would you capitalize on the positive trends that you're reporting and seeing here? This is one that we've definitely talked with some of our partners and just really seen the industry. And the best insight that we would provide to you is to really talk to the students at your school. There are many different groups that have been creative with international students, with students of different races and of color joining together, in particular to talk about these issues. Speak to them and talk to them about what they'd like to see in terms of, advertising to international students, or how they'd like to be included. They're the future of our country in the US here. They're going to learn to be in these positions and potentially president one day. So meet with them and give them the voice and the ability to, hear them out and listen to them, because ultimately they made the decision to come to your college or university. So, consult with them and go about that process. We really feel like its benefit, it includes everyone within the school, and it will make your approach to international students, a lot more streamlined, because you're hearing it from current students, ones that have been there in the past, or ones that are, feeling important on the issue. But I think that's an excellent question. And more so, going forward here with net natives, this is something that we'd love the opportunity to discuss more with you. Again, you can visit our website here at netnatives.com. These trends and the report that I just spoke through is available on our website. It is a downloadable report. For anyone that did sign up for the webinar beforehand, we also will be emailing one to you directly, so expect that to come through. And again, here, as we move forward, as I mentioned, we will look into, again, over the next weeks, months, years, how has Joe Biden's presidency affected the US education domestically and internationally. But if you do have any topics that you would like Net Natives to cover in terms of higher education, there's so many different avenues that we can cover. Please engage and reach out to us. Like I said, netnatives.com is where you can find us and reach out to us directly. We'd love to get more feedback about what you would like to see as a school. What are some of the trends you'd like us to touch on? It gives us great opportunity to really survey and get a sense of what's going forward here. So appreciate everyone for joining us today. As I said throughout, it's a really historic day in the United States with the 46th president of the United States being elected. Hopefully you all will join as the president looks to speak soon or may have started already. And we will see you at the next webinar. So thank you everyone and have a great day.